There are so many little words and nuggets from Thomas Frank in this interview as his first as Spurs head coach that tell me exactly why he is the perfect manager to replace Ange Postecoglou at Tottenham. He has sat down with the club and done his first interview where he was quoted as saying it's always about winning. The last thing that Thomas Frank said in this 9-minute interview, which I implore you to go and watch, he said, no one can say this team aren't winners. Hopefully we can do our best to become serial winners in the future. That absolutely has to be the goal, but there are so many other brilliant little bits in here that tell me why and affirm to me that I was correct in my decision in thinking a few months ago that this guy was going to be the perfect guy to take charge. We're going to break down the interview in this video, but that's not all I want to do. I've been wanting to make this video for the last couple of weeks to tell you why Frank is not just the perfect tactical appointment, but he's the perfect man to take over at Tottenham. If you like this video, if you like the appointment of Thomas Frank, make sure to like the video, make sure to subscribe to the channel. There's going to be so much more content coming over the next few days and next few weeks as we head into pre-season. There's so much interesting stuff in here. But I also want to talk about stuff that's outside of this interview as well. But we'll kind of go through and kind of break it down kind of step by step. In the introduction, he's talking about alignment a lot. That is kind of a word that he uses. He kicks off by saying that he is really excited about becoming the new Tottenham Hotspur head coach. Super excited. The feeling of being the new head coach is extraordinary. I think one thing about Frank as well is that what's quite clear, and I've spoken about this before, he's a very, very good communicator. He's a different kind of communicator to Ange, but has a very similar engaging kind of tone about the way he speaks and engaging mannerisms as well. He's just a very engaging talker. You kind of hang on his every word. And I said this last week, that I'd been kind of engorging on so much Thomas Frank content, and I was really excited for him to finally sit down and actually do this, because when he speaks, you listen. And again, it's a new manager coming in. You're excited by that. Of course, you're going to get swept up in it. But there are so many interesting things that he says here. But he's very, very engaging. He spoke about there being very good conversations with Levy, Johan Langer, who obviously he's worked with before, and Vinay about club structure, processes. Frank came forward with his ideas, how he wants things to be done. He wants to kind of do it his own way in terms of building that team and building the club forward. But he spoke a lot about alignment, and that's something that Levy and Vinay Venkatesham spoke about in the interview that they sat down and did yesterday, which I'm going to react to in another video tomorrow, and talk about kind of where Tottenham Hotspur are going, that kind of bigger picture. He spoke about the head coach being a very important person, but if he doesn't have good people around him, it's impossible to succeed. And when he's talking about good people, he's obviously talking about the higher-ups. He's talking about that good attitude, that good environment that he wants to create with the players as well. Obviously, he's also talking about the people around him in terms of bringing those coaching staff from Brentford with him, the likes of Justin Cochran, etc., people that he can trust and they know they're going to kind of do a good job. But you have to be all aligned, all on the same page. Your vision, your goal has to be that North Star kind of goal. You have to be aligned in that. Vinay Venkatesham spoke about he wouldn't come to Tottenham Hotspur if he didn't think that was the case. And I think Thomas Frank would be saying the same as well. Again, we've heard these things kind of all before with Spurs, but it feels like that alignment is something that was really important to Frank. Of course, it's naturally a step up for him anyway, but it's a thing that he kind of made a big thing of in that initial first stage of the interview, where he said that they need to be aligned on transfer strategy, structure, playing style, all those kind of things. Again, like I said, he's got that experience of working with Johan Langer before, so that obviously does help. He said we will work hard every single day to make sure we make as many magic moments for the fans as possible. After that, he was asked about his style of play. And now, obviously, we did a video on the channel. Make sure to go and check that out, about how Thomas Frank might set up at Tottenham. And I opened that video by saying I think the most exciting thing about Frank's appointment is that we actually don't know how he's going to set up. He's a pragmatist. And I think when people hear that word, they get turned off. They think boring. You know, they think pragmatism, negativity, not taking too many risks, being cautious. That's really not the case. That application of pragmatism comes with Frank looking at the players, assessing their strengths and weaknesses, and profiling and platforming them correctly to be able to get the best out of them, and then in turn win more football matches. It's always about winning. You know, you can see that quote right down there in the bottom corner. He said he wants to. He did say something quite funny where he was like he wants to show his style of play rather than talking about it. But he said I'll kind of give you a bit of almost a kind of a whistle stop version. He said the intention, and again this is something that I think some Spurs fans were turned off about initially when we heard about Frank, because they've seen him play five at the back in the past and seen them be defensive and trying to hang on to results and all those kind of things. That was the reality of where he was at Brentford, wanting to stay in the Premier League. Again, I've said this so many times over the course of the last 6 months that you've seen a difference in Brentford this season. Frank spoke in this interview about the intention to play aggressive, front-footed football, and that is exactly what Brentford did. It's almost like I said, Brentford kind of realised that they're a Premier League club this season and can play at that level. And the evolution, they've changed every year, they've evolved every year. That evolution is really, really important. But he talks about the ethos and the history of the attacking football at Tottenham Hotspur, and that's something that he wanted to kind of marry up with his own philosophy. Again, if you've watched as much like Thomas Frank content as I have over the last week or so, if you've watched the Gary Lineker piece for the BBC, for Football Focus, that he sat down with him and spoke about when he went out for dinner at his house, he spoke about his philosophy is to be aggressive and be attacking. But again, your philosophy and your tactics, they're not always kind of one and the same. You have to be able to adapt in games. You can't kind of go all out with that. As much as, playing Ange ball, that was the way so many fans want to win. I really wanted to win that way. But in reality, that's not realistic. But you have to have that. Obviously, when I say not realistic, we won the Europa League, but we kind of abandoned Ange's kind of core principles to do that. And if you want to win things on a consistent basis, you do have to show that element of pragmatism 100%. And I think that's what Frank is going to bring. And he said there's lots of attacking talent at the club. He's very excited about that. Very big on principles in terms of chance creation in the final third. He spoke specifically about getting in behind teams, putting crosses in the box, utilising the attacking weapons that we already do have. He was quoted as saying in this interview, and I've heard him say it before, if you don't take risks, you also take risks. Again, that desire to be brave. Brave was a word that he used a lot, talking about man-to-man pressing in this interview, just going forward generally, being brave. The players need to be brave and trust themselves. He said that he can live with players making mistakes by taking risks and trying, but it's about the hard work and discipline. And if that goes, that's what he really struggles with. Working hard is a non-negotiable. And again, of course, any manager's going to say that, and that has to be the core foundation of any successful football team: working hard and be and kind of disciplined. But you want to hear it. And I'm not saying I don't think the Spurs players didn't work hard for a second under Ange last season, but again, I think that Frank is trying to kind of best give them that platform to be able to go and succeed by profiling and platforming these players correctly, but also knowing that if you don't work hard, you're not going to be in the team. You're not going to be in the team. He spoke about the squad. Very talented, very good squad. Very excited to start working with them. Looking forward to getting to know them, to feel them, to understand them, understand the relationships between the players and how you can get the best out of them. That's what he said, and that's the key thing, how you can get the best out of them. He said he's got ideas in his head of how he wants to play, but again, this goes back to Frank's kind of pragmatic philosophy, adapting to what he sees, playing to players' strengths. He talked about not just improving the young players, he talked about improving and working with the experienced ones as well, specifically name-checking Dominic Solanke as a player he's a big fan of. He said, I'm sure we'll make him score a lot of goals. He also name-checked Maddison and Bentancur. And if you actually, we can kind of scroll through it at the start here, you can see Frank kind of meeting Vinay Venkatesham. You see him going into the gym in a second, where, I think I've gone past it actually, where Dragusin and Maddison were actually already there. There's Dragusin. There's James Maddison. And I think that can be a really important relationship next season. I'm really excited about that. He also name-checked Odobert Udogie and Archie Graham Bergvall as players with high ceilings, although he said I couldn't named anyone. Again, Frank obviously has that experience of working with young players, working with Denmark under 16s, under 17s, under 19s as well. Incredibly experienced at developing young talent. But I think the thing I'm excited for the most is about building on what we've already got. I'm excited to see who Spurs bring through the door in the summer. We need to add quality and improve that squad, but also when you look at the work that Justin Cochrane and Frank have done together in terms of improving those attackers year on year at Brentford, their output, the refinement in their game, little tweaks to just make them more effective and get the best out of them, that's something that's really exciting. Finally, just quickly on the interview before we get on to some other thoughts that I did have, he said it's all, again, at the start, like we spoke about with the quote. He said it's always about winning on a Saturday and a Tuesday. Again, Frank is used to working with demanding schedules, being a manager in the Championship. Obviously, he's not made that step up yet to the Premier League, and balancing that. Sorry, when I say making that step up, balancing Premier League football with Champions League football. It's a big step up, but again, Mauricio Pochettino hadn't done that, managing Premier League football and Europa League football at the start, and then Champions League football off the back of that, and you look how he adapted. And again, that adaptability as a manager is what's going to make you succeed in multiple competitions. Working out the strengths and weaknesses of the opposition, knowing your players' physical limits, making tweaks where things have to be made to manage games and get through games. He also talked about the development of individual players on a day-to-day basis, him working very closely with him, his staff, and the players to really improve. He spoke a lot about the fans. Fans are important. He said it's a great fan base, making moments they remember. Going on a journey together, there'll be ups and downs. It's about how we get through it together. He said the connection between himself and the fans is crucial, and I want to come back to that very, very quickly, very, very shortly. He also spoke about making Tottenham Hotspur Stadium a fortress. Us as match-going fans, who are, you hate to say this sometimes, are the lifeblood and the most important fans of the club, had to sit through and endure a lot of dark losses last season, a lot of grim days where we were getting turned over at home by teams that Spurs should never be getting turned over by. And as much as it did work to prioritise the Europa League to go on and win it, I think for Ange to kind of come out and say that we abandoned the Premier League in January is kind of a bit of an insult to those match-going fans, whereas Frank has kind of come out and said here, we want to make Tottenham Hotspur Stadium a fortress, and he's very intent on building that connection with the fans, which is something he's done really well at Brentford. He spoke about Ange at the end as well. He said Ange will forever be a legend. Huge congratulations to him and the club. He said he's standing on Ange's shoulders and working on the foundations Ange has built. The feeling and excitement and joy, he said, when you saw the fans' faces at the parade and at the ground when we won the final, he said wow, and he said hopefully we can create more of those moments. And he ended it by saying no one can say the squad aren't winners. Hopefully we can do our best to become serial winners in the future. I'm really, really excited about this and what Frank can kind of what Frank can bring to this group and improve on this group. But again, there are so many little nuggets there to kind of build on. I've wanted to make this video for a while about why he's not just a perfect tactical manager, he's the perfect man to kind of take over. Culture beats everything is something that Frank has said in interviews at Brentford. I think he said that on the High Performance podcast. At Brentford, it's a culture based on passion, hard work, again, open communication, that environment, that no dickheads kind of policy. Everybody is open. Those strong bonds being forged between the players and the staff and the fans as well. Frank, one thing that Frank did, I remember when they came to the Premier League, was regardless of the result at Brentford, they would do a lap of honour at home every single game. And again, that is something that people might turn their nose up at a little bit and look at it a little bit cringe or something. That thing of going around and looking those supporters in the eyes every week and either celebrating that moment together or looking at them and saying we'll do better, it affords you a bit more time as well. And obviously Brentford, the expectations are totally different to what they are at Tottenham. But those sorts of little things, again, working in line with someone like Vinay Venkatesham, who's kind of been brought in to improve that fan engagement. It feels like we've got a manager who knows about building a community and building a culture at a football club. And Ange did that. Ange had a lot of that. He had the connection with the fans. Again, they share a lot of the same principles in that kind of off-the-field stuff in terms of building those connections and building that environment. And which is, again, why I think Frank is the perfect manager to kind of take over and build on the platform that Ange has created. Frank was quoted, I think the word he described in terms of those characters in the Brentford dressing room and about empowering the players to kind of build that culture, which is something that Ange also did as well, little bit hands-off at times, intervening when needed. And again, I think it's going to kind of, although I think Frank is a great man manager, I do think that he knows when to kind of step back and let the players lead. He spoke about cultural architects. He referenced in the High Performance podcast interview, Norgard, Jensen, Johan Visser, Vitaly Janelt. I remember him speaking about players like that, taking younger players under their wing and helping develop them that way and kind of guiding them with their emotional intelligence. It's something that I think it's culturally such a good fit. And again, this is a guy that's been coaching for over 30 years, like grassroots through to academy football, to Brøndby, to Brentford as an assistant, and then to the head coach. Like I said, he worked in the Danish youth setup for 5 years as a head coach, as under 16, under 17, under 19 coach. He's incredibly experienced at developing young talent. He knows what it takes to nurture that talent, not just on the pitch, but off the pitch as well. Give them that support and give them that kind of guidance. And again, when you think about how that alignment that he spoke about in terms of the philosophy and what Spurs are trying to do in terms of really attracting some of the best young talent in the world with Bergvalls, Vuskovics, etc., the players that we're producing in our academy, we've brought in the right man to not speed that process up, but just to keep it going really nicely and nurture these young talents in a really, really kind of important way that they can really have an impact on the club. like I said, he spoke a lot about culture, but one thing that Frank's spoken about, not just tactically, and it goes back to that kind of pragmatism and adaptability. I think in one of the interviews as well that I watched, he said something, he talks about never stop learning. Like, it's a constantly kind of changing environment out there in the modern world, but also in football. And the best coaches do adapt on the pitch. They change their systems. They're not totally wedded to one way of playing. And we've kind of making that jump from a manager that, for a large part, was, but also abandoned that to win the trophy. But again, he was intent on playing the way that he wanted to. But whereas Frank is intent on playing the way he best feels is going to win games of football. And again, he knows that for these players, as human beings, the world is kind of constantly changing around them as well. And it feels like he's a very intelligent guy that's going to move with that and do the right thing for those players off the pitch, but also give them the best platform to succeed on the pitch by making tweaks game to game, working out the strengths and weaknesses of the opposition and playing accordingly, working out the strengths and weaknesses of your players to make you win games of football. The emphasis on marginal gains is something that I'm really interested in as well. And I'm going to do a video about that on the pitch, you know, in terms of the detail, in terms of throw-ins and corners and all those kind of things. It's just, I find it kind of super exciting. And look, Frank, the reason that I think it was so crucial to make the change was because it felt like next season, and I could be wrong, and it's always going to be that not knowing with Ange Postecoglou, but a lot of Spurs fans were kind of talking about Frank being this manager that was attainable at any time. We're Tottenham, we can go and get the manager that we want to get, and if Frank is the guy, then why don't we stick with Ange for a bit and kind of see how things go? When Frank took over at Brentford, it was halfway through the 18-19 season. He lost 8 out of the first 10 games, and then went on to finish 11th. They trusted in him because they saw the underlying data. They saw the metrics in terms of the training that wasn't there with the manager that was appointed prior to him after Mark Warburton. They trusted him. They believed in the vision. And if Frank was to come in halfway through the season and lose 8 out of 10, there's no way that he would be afforded that time at Tottenham Hotspur by the fans, especially given the fact that there was a lot of people that were upset with the sacking of Ange Postecoglou. You know, so I think it was really important to get Frank in now, to really get his teeth into those players, give them a pre-season and really go at the league next year and go at the Cups and go at the Champions League. I think it would have been harder for him to... I'm not saying we couldn't have had long-term success under Frank. I definitely think we could have, because look at what he's done at Brentford. But again, it was about being afforded the time, and whether he was going to get that time at Spurs, I'm not sure. Frank is 100% the sort of coach that would have been attainable mid-season, like I said, but it's much better to have made the change and got him in now to really get his teeth into this group and kick on. Like, I think he's really, really excited to do that. Really, really excited. And I think the staff that he's brought with him, I think, are going to have a massive benefit on Tottenham as well. Justin Cochrane was a coach that was really highly sought after, has been really highly sought after throughout his career, working at Manchester United, head of talent development there. Obviously at Brentford, at England as well, and with Tottenham as well. He was mainly tasked with kind of improving Brentford from an attacking sense. And you look again at the track record of what he's actually been able to achieve with Mbeumo, with Visser, with Tony, with Damsgaard, with Keane Lewis-Potter, with Kevin Schade, etc. Those little minor tweaks. And we're going to talk about that in videos throughout the summer in terms of improving Tottenham's attack and the impact that someone like Cochrane can have. But again, the culture is important, that connection with the fans is important, and that improvement and that pragmatism is going to be really important to hopefully make Tottenham successful. Culture beats everything. And making that environment somewhere that those players feel comfortable, feel happy, feel that they can improve in, building that connection with the fans, making sure we're all pulling in the right direction. That's what Tottenham need. We need that after sacking a manager that a lot of fans... It was an unpopular decision. It was the hard decision for Levy. That's why I think, you know, as much as he deserves stick for a lot of things, he deserves credit for that, I think, to sticking to his guns. And well, it wasn't just him, it was a joint decision, but yeah. There's a lot of things that kind of stick out to me with Frank in that interview, but I've wanted to make this video for a while because there's been so much content that I've kind of been gorging, these little sound bites and nuggets that make me think, yes, all the lights bulbs are kind of going off in my head. I've been a fan of him for a while, but when you do more digging and you hear things like never stop learning, no dickheads, culture beats everything, culture matters, and that pragmatism and that adaptability to play in different systems, but still have that philosophy at your core of wanting to play attacking, aggressive football. Someone who is great at developing young talent, but also really wants to work with those experienced players as well. He wants to make Dom Solanke score more goals. He wants to improve James Maddison. It's a really good listen. There's so much great content out there as well. I've actually made a playlist of some good Frank stuff, so I'll put it in the description. But I'm really excited. You guys should be too. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thomas Frank's era starts now. Up the Spurs. Make sure to like and subscribe.